we'll start the meeting. It was brought to my attention that we have a new member, and not to single her out, why don't we just go around and have everybody introduce themselves and the entity that they represent. I'm Joe Grudy. I'm from Lewiston. I'm retired. I'm the citizen appointment of the city of Lewiston, and I'm also serving as chair.
And I'm Bethel Shields, and I'm an appointee for Auburn.
I'm Dale Dowdy. I'm the Public Works Director in Lewiston, and so I'm serving for Lewiston.
I'm Erica Kidd. I'm the Watershed Manager for Auburn Water District and City of Lewiston Water Division.
Sid Hazelton, Auburn Water Superintendent, and by virtue of my position, I'm a co-clerk of the commission.
Kevin Gagne, I'm Deputy Director for Lewiston Public Works, Water and Sewer Superintendent, also co-chair for this board.
Mike Broadbent, Auburn Water and Sewer Assistant Superintendent, and by position I'm the Secretary of the Commission.
Actually, Dahir, I'm just a student doing transition classes, so I'm doing Josh Shadow. Really sharp.
Casey Geiger, Auburn Water Trustee.
I'm Mary Sylvester, I'm the President of the Auburn Water District.
Heather Hunter, Finance Director for the City of Lewiston. I'm the Treasurer of the Watershed.
My name is Alicia Ray. I'm the Lewiston City Council representative to the Water Commission.
I'm Steve French. I represent the towns of Minot, Buckfield, and Heber.
Amy Landry, Executive Director at AVCOG and Public Commission.
Camille Parrish. I'm representing Auburn Water District.
Welcome. First item of business is approve the minutes of the September 11th, 2019 meeting. I was in Europe, so I read the minutes.
Motion to approve.
Motion made,
Second.
moved and seconded. All in favor? Thank you. And Heather, quarterly financial update.
Yes, I believe you got the updated version as of November 6th, which included the Auburn Water District's billing, so that was probably the most current. You can see where the water district, the watershed stands as of 2 months left into its fiscal year. So we have, I should have brought my grading glasses in. We have total revenues of $150,293. Other than the contributions and interest, there's not been a lot of change from the last presentation. Total expenditures are just shy of $75,000. Like I said, we have the quarterly through September for Auburn Water District. I know there are a couple of Lewiston Water Division's bills that they're working on getting me. We've had a little bit of turnover in that position. The source protection that has a credit balance of $6,200 represents the Water Pollution Control Authority's payment to do source protection project within the district or within the commission. On the sinking fund side of things, again, other than the purchase, which you don't see on the statement of revenue expenditures, we did have one land purchase. Other than that, it's pretty benign on that side of that funding source. So total right now, we are looking at a surplus of $82,300 or so.
Any questions?
I had a couple. What is our estimated balance of total expenditure? Do you know?
That would be on the budget.
Okay. So that we could, I was thinking if we had that much money, we'll wait for these stuff.
And Tiz Crowley came in. She's also a member of the City of Auburn. Okay, is there a motion to accept the report? Move, Dan. Second. Thank you. All in favor? Thank you. Now, the item that we've all been waiting for, 2020 budget presentation.
So it seemed like no matter which page I start out, everybody kind of shuffles around, so I think I'm gonna start out with the trend information. That's probably the easiest, recognizing most of you probably looked at the supporting schedule of what makes up each of those line items. So you will see the current budget that we're working with, just for the new member, we run on a calendar, just like the water district. City of Lewiston's on a fiscal year with a June 30th. So the 2019 budget was $138,115 for expenditures. To Tiz's question, right now I'm looking at an estimated actual of $123,300 or so, based upon what I know that's outstanding. Looking at the revenue side of things, you will see we balanced the budget in FY19 with the use of $38,000 in fund balance or carried forward. Based upon actual projections, looking at the forestry line item, obviously that wasn't an item, revenue source that we had anticipated in the budget, but we did receive revenues of just shy of $54,000. We will not be using that fund balance, or we won't need that fund balance this year to balance the operations, and I'm still anticipating a surplus of about $29,800. So looking at the 2020 budget, which is the one that was originally posted, there were two items which I think I'll talk about at the end that came up for discussion afterwards. But you will see that with the 2020 budget, I'm looking at expenditures of $136,615. We had minor adjustments to the Auburn Water District. The source protection management gives us some more patrol and project work to look at. The public education, the labor and so forth with the outreach, those had minor fluctuations from the current year. We increased legal based upon what we were seeing with some of the services that we've been contracting with our attorney. And then probably the biggest decrease was we had miscellaneous of about $500, and that pretty much covers all of it loosely. Outside services. Looking at those funding sources and the contributions to budget, recognizing both entities have somewhat of a tighter budget based upon some of the treatment that has been done at the lake. I'm looking at a contribution from each entity of $40,000 apiece and bringing forward $54,365 in fund balance. You will notice the surpluses from 2016, 17, and 18 are there. Those are actual audited surpluses. So, you know, clearly we have funding available to do so. And then we estimate the $1,500 that we've been receiving annually for the boat inspection and $750 for interest. Based upon where we've been from the sinking fund, and our sinking fund is used to buy land acquisition or one-time capital source protection work or funding for source protection projects. I'm looking at each entity providing $25,000, so a total contribution per entity of $65,000. So it's a 5.18% decrease from the current budget.
Questions?
Well, since no one wants to start, I'll be happy to start then. Ruler across. Is the 10% increase in labor, public education labor sufficient, do you feel, based on the increase in?
Based upon
benefits?
well, the only benefits that are paid by the commission are Social Security and Medicare and the unemployment. but based upon the
Health
time,
insurance isn't paid?
not on this,
Is that, okay.
No, she is a part-time.
Oh,
Yes.
okay.
With no, right.
And retirement, she doesn't work enough hours?
right.
Okay. Then that explains that, because that's where I was. And, happy to see we increased public relations to 3,000, a 20% increase. No, it sounds like a lot, but it wasn't a lot of money. Can we just make sure in our planning to have some adult, rather than just children, we've talked about that every year, and some more promotion. I think they do an outstanding job on the events and that, but short notices and, you know, we don't get reminders as an example. I just think they're such great programs that I'd like more promotion of it. And then, a 200% increase, legal, and I know we've gone above, do you think that, I know you prepared this earlier, that's why I'm asking questions, because otherwise you say, Tiz, I thought about this, but I just, sometimes need people to say, are you sure we have enough money?
I am comfortable
Okay.
with that amount.
I always just like to double check. So what happens with the 29,000 that we had as surplus this year? It just rolls into the accumulated fund balance?
Correct.
Okay, I'd like us to give some, that's a lot, that's 20% of our revenue. I'd like to take at least half of that and apply it to reduce the contributions from the entities. I know that we had a reduction of, I think, 5.1, but we're all stretched with budgets, and even $7,500 would be an improvement for each district. So that's my only concern, is I'd like to I'd use it all, but I'd settle for half of the surplus from this year to be applied to reduce the amounts paid by the others. Those are my comments.
Is that a motion?
I'd let people talk first, I think,
Okay.
because somebody might have a better idea.
Can you say that again louder?
But somebody may have a better idea?
I thought before that.
That we take half of our surplus money and apply it, so about $15,000, and apply it to reduce the amount due from the two entities, which would be about
Is that-
$7,500.
Is that real money until it's audited?
That's kind of what I was gonna,
I
So,
think it's
I
monopoly money
don't
at this
mind
moment.
the suggestion of increasing the carry forward, but I would not use the 29,000 as the snapshot, because
we-
that's an audited
Not
number.
audited.
So, I'm
Is
not,
this the-
these amounts
Right.
would be the ones that you would look at. Recognizing if we bring a substantial amount forward this year, we won't have it available for future years. So we've been slowly increasing that as our surpluses have warranted. Clearly in 2018, we had significant turnover, at the district, and some of the projects that were slated did not come to fruition. So, that left us with a healthy surplus, and you will see, we are increasing the balance carried forward. That's the commissioner's prerogative to determine whether they wanna increase that or not, but I just would not flag that 29,000
Well,
as
that's
the
the other
number to
reason to
use.
take half of whatever the reserve was. I know that we're trying to build a balance, a fund balance carry forward. On the other side of it, I'm sure both entities have needs that have the money now. But again, it would be the will of the majority. But I would take some portion, 50% of whatever the audited amount is, in order to reduce, and you could do that for their second or third quarter payments.
Can I ask, when we purchase land, where does that money come from?
Currently, it's coming from the sinking fund. It's not part of this kind of
Okay.
presentation.
Could it be?
In some place you told us.
We
what was
could,
thinking.
if there was an opportunity to buy a parcel that the commissioners felt that there was not enough funding available in the sinking fund, we could look at the operating fund to do that.
Mr. Chair? Can I just give the other perspective, or another perspective? I think, although budgets are very tight, and I think the money will get used no matter where it is, it just seems that we've put a lot of money into an alum treatment, and that alum treatment is going to is simply postponing something that's continuing. We're putting a lot of effort, recently, and I think more effort, this commission will put more into projects and other things to, reduce contaminants. I just think not knowing what where this next year will bring us politically and otherwise, I might suggest that we, have the same conversation next year and see where we are. Seems like we're getting traction on a number of projects, a number of educational things, and not just property purchases, but all of those things. And I think it'd be nice to let it, just kind of, one of the couple things I think we've talked about that I really like to talk about this year is coming up with a new watershed protection plan and developing some more projects, and really focusing, maybe hiring a consultant to do that. Given all those things kind of on the table for this next year, once we get a new chair, I guess I'd respectfully suggest that we give that another year and see where we are and see what projects are in front of us.
I think our watershed plan does, you're absolutely right, I looked at the date, and it's really out of date. We have some others, I guess though, and the alum is exactly one of the reasons why I wanted to return some money, even though it's very little. The alum treatment is not paid by this entity, it's paid by the two that support us. And I do have concerns and fears there will be something else. And actually, the alum treatment will come up with this water, this was my other part of this page, was the water withdrawals, that I'd like to talk about that fee.
So the alum treatment was intended to treat the lake, right? This commission's job is to protect the halo around the lake.
Absolutely, agree.
And since that alum treatment, we chose to provide an alum treatment that simply was a temporary mitigation. The work of this committee is even more setting it than even before, because we didn't apply an alum treatment that was intended. Our work wasn't done.
I agree with you. I just think that there may be unanticipated expenses on that issue.
Thank you. So,
But if we can look
but I
at
can
it
live
next
either way.
year, if we can put that money aside and use it as needed, but next year, I won't be here next year, so that's the other reason to promote securing it now.
Well, I know I'm at my first meeting, but, that I see that we're relying on a one-time timber sale assets to balance the budget this year. So, I'm worried about if we use the surplus from this year, then what will we have left for next year if we have the situation where we need some money from the fund balance carryover?
And that's a valid point, which is why I don't bring all of it forward. I kind of cushion it as we go.
Yeah, thank you.
Anyone else? You wanna offer that as a motion?
Nope, I can feel the table.
All right.
And support the positions. Again, I'm not opposed, the fact that we had the dialogue, and I know Dale will be here next year and he'll make sure this gets talked about. The only other thing I'd like to talk about is the water withdrawal revenue. Now, we've talked about, they pay minimal amount because they pull it directly from the lake, so they don't need our distribution center. However, I think it's time to visit two things. They would not be able to do that, A, if we did not do things like the alum treatment, and B, the source protection. And I don't think either of those areas that we work on and spend money are reflected in the fee that we charge. So I think this needs some attention to reflect the true cost to them. It's more than just drawing from the lake. And I don't know if we need to do that now because we really don't have the background. I'm sure our staff can tell us what a more appropriate price would be, but I'd like it to be on our next agenda to raise the rate to reflect those two things, source protection and future treatment.
What we can do is look at, we do have a water withdrawal policy, I can bring that forward at the next meeting.
And does that have the, how we determine the rate in it? Perfect.
Well, the rate is in it, but we can review it and see if that's appropriate.
Can we circulate that in advance?
Sure.
Yes.
Is there anything in the Great Ponds Act that regulates the amount of money that these people pay at all?
I'd have to research that, I'm not sure.
Is this just like the splash trucks or?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
So
The trucks that fill up at the
Right.
turnout.
And at our last meeting, we talked about the Route 4 project
Yeah.
and how that's gonna impact that whole scenario
That's
anyway,
good.
so I think as a comprehensive look at
Yeah.
that, we can consider all of it at that
Right.
time, when
That's a good.
there's gonna have to be a change made
Anyway,
anyway.
Very good.
I would agree, and it's been a long period of time since we first started charging people for water withdrawal.
I may have the original calculation that Norm Laney did, and we have not increased it since that went into effect.
And if I recall, the people who were withdrawing the water at that time thought we were going to crush them.
Correct.
And then they found out that, oh, that's not bad, so I think we could get more money.
Well, if we can just look at our next one, I think you're right about the comprehensive plan, but I don't wanna wait 4 years for when that project actually really comes to the table.
No, but I think
If
we
it's
know
been
what the
20
project's
We know
gonna
what the
accomplish.
right.
Right, but we know that a rate increase for this.
Yep.
If we
Yes.
haven't looked at the policy in 20 years, we probably can do something in the next
And
60
you're
days.
right, cause I think our efforts benefit them,
Right.
and they should share in that benefit. There's a reason they're taking it from Lake Auburn.
Right.
Lots of other choices in
Right.
there, right? There's a reason they take it,
Yeah.
not out of the Androscoggin.
If there are no other questions, I would entertain a motion to accept. Moved and seconded, all in favor? Thank you.
Mr. Chair, there were 2 other programs that were kind of discussed as part of the budget that I think, Erica, if you wouldn't mind
Is
piggybacking
all in
with me,
favor?
explaining the
Sure.
program. One was the Smart Lake, our Lake Smart program.
Lake Smart program.
For $1,500, and then to establish a
motion.
fountain
Have that on the
system
agenda
Yes.
next month,
grant for
and to circulate
$4,000.
that policy.
Yes.
Those were not part of the budget, but it was felt that with the surpluses that we did have, that if the commission was interested in one or both of those programs, that we could appropriate that funds now and then carry forward in next year's fiscal year if we needed to. So I'll let Erica explain what both of those
Sure,
are.
yep, so the Lake Smart program is a program put together by Maine Lake Society, and it's a volunteer program, and what it is, it's for lakefront or pondfront, any waterfront, property, and people who own that land, they can reach out to us, and we can come out and do an evaluation of their property and see, you know, how lake friendly is it? Could they use some buffers right along the shoreline? Do they have a lot of impervious services? Or is it set up really great? You know, they've got a lot of grass, they don't have a lot of impervious area on their lot, they've got a good setback. So it's a program that's done very well throughout Maine, it's been around for quite some time. And so we wanted to do that on Lake Auburn, and we were looking at Little Wilson Pond too, because there are only 13 lakefront corners on Lake Auburn, and you know, most of it is forested, so that's not the ideal location for it, but Little Wilson Pond, as you know, drains into our watershed, drains into Lake Auburn, and there are a lot of waterfront properties on that pond. And it's a good community outreach, and like I said, it's volunteer only. You know, we can offer suggestions about what they'd like to do if we find some things that would be helpful, like planting buffers or putting in some erosion control. So Lauren Olson, our education and outreach coordinator, she did a training on this program through Maine Lake Society, and I participated in the field portion with her. We actually went out and did an evaluation of John Bono's property, which is very lake friendly, and so that was helpful for us to get an understanding, and we went out with the lead trainer, I think her name's Maggie Shannon, who's been with this program for about 20 years. So our idea was, we'd like to offer this program and advertise for it, and if homeowners want to reach out to us and have us come out and do a site evaluation, and they'd like to install some lake-friendly BMPs, that we would help fund that. I think we talked about, you know, up to $500 per homeowner is what we would look to share, and with a max of, what did I have in here, Heather?
1,500.
1,500, thank you. So, you know, if 3 people wanted to fully take advantage of that, be up to $1,500. So that's an explanation on that program. Any questions on that?
I think the fact that you're gonna fund part of it is important, that, you know, you're not just walking on somebody's land and say, plant a tree here, plant a tree there.
It doesn't go well.
There'll be some funding to go with it, and I think that will gets you on their property easier.
Yeah, and we had talked about, Gammons is local, there's several, farms and nurseries that are local, maybe they'd want to work with us and do, here's 10% off these native plants, or, erosion controls, or, any other lake-friendly EMPs that they have.
I thought actually it was done and included in the budget because I only had the minutes to read from. So I support both projects. It mentioned you distributed an RFP to study and I couldn't find that any place. In the minutes, it says you distributed the study to the pond.
Yeah.
So one is like a copy of that, but I would support both of your endeavors.
Oh, okay, so the Blanchard Pond is actually, that's a separate piece,
But isn't that part of your part two, the 4,000?
no, that is
Okay.
actually for a different
Okay.
program. Yep.
I like your work, what can I tell you?
So we did just get that, our proposal back for that Blanchard Pond. The other program we looked at, and this is modeled off of something that Portland Water District has done, they're another large unfiltered system, to continue our work with schools, which we haven't done as much this year, but it's a huge part of our community. We took this program idea from Portland Water District, and the idea is that we can offer some grant funding, some money, to have a refillable water bottle, water fountain put into a school or other public area, that, receives water, that is a customer of either Lewiston or Auburn. And with that fountain install, we could get some good, kind of PR and community outreach and explain with that this is where your water is coming from Lake Auburn. These are all the measures that we have in place to help keep it clean and, safe. And that fountain system would be in partnership with the Lake Auburn Watershed Protection Commission. So it's getting our name out there, it's getting our message out there. It's a direct connection between lake, water system, community. And the pricing for those fountain systems, they range on depending on what you want. You can have a single unit, you can have a remodel, you can have a brand new unit, you can have one for outdoors, for like sports complexes. So there's a range of pricing, but if we wanted to do a couple of those, the 4,000 is what would cover the unit. And then the partner who receives that opportunity, they would pay for the installation.
I love those. I've seen them in my travel. I didn't know what they cost or how they got the, and I've used one within the last 2 weeks, so there must be some in Portland. I would just ask that they be put in a facility that is public and available to all.
Yep.
School systems, in my opinion, do not meet that qualification.
Okay.
So, a sports arena, a city building, a conference center, any place that. Library. Ooh, good idea.
City hall.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
But schools are not available to anybody who does not have a child in that school. And they're not available to anybody that does, but not there every day.
Okay.
What's your vision for what they'd look like, and how would the message be conveyed with them? Is it a plaque beside it, or is it a?
Yes, so either, a plaque or a sticker, whatever it may be, right by the water fountain unit. And then Lauren and I talked about, whoever receives this funding will need to have either kind of a presentation or something where we come and either we talk, or there needs to be some education and some, media outlet for it.
There's some great examples. If you go to one of these, I wish I could remember where I was in the last, I think Whole Foods, anybody who likes Whole Foods, I think that's where it's at. But it tells you on a number of them, how many bottles that you're saving, the plastic in the plastic bottles using refillable. They're great messaging, and the piece you're adding that I have not seen or that I can recall is promoting the Watershed Commission. That is great, but all of the others that I've seen have some kind of messaging like that.
Yep, airports have.
The community college has them. Central Maine
Portland
Community
has one,
College
and
has
most
one.
airports now, I've noticed that.
Yeah, airports have.
Usually right next to a bubbler.
Yep.
So for me, the plaque is for me, plaque is the part that I'd support.
Correct.
The water fountain's great. I mean, I've had employees that have had those, they're wonderful for lots of reasons, for overall, stewardship, I'm good for that, but this commission's thing is, whatever message we're bringing with it and the durability of that message, if it's simply a sticker that's gonna fade off, if it's simply a one-time presentation, that to me isn't getting, $4,000 isn't getting our message. Our message is why this is coming from us instead of a solid waste facility or something, so. However that vision comes about, conserving water and managing your water resources, whatever we could do there is why that excites me, more so than the fountain itself.
Right, it's the message.
You get the person to the message by the fountain.
Right. Okay. One of the things that Eric and I talked about when she explained these programs is to come up with some type of procedure for both of them to determine how these were gonna be rolled out, how are people gonna be treated equitably and so forth. So if we had to fall back on a procedure, I think it's already documented and in place.
They're wildly successful and we have
Yes.
too many.
I guess I'd like to remind you that mine in Huber and Buckfield have a lot of children, and occasionally we need to work them into the mix.
Yes.
Yes.
And I know mine has got a great water supply.
Noted.
You guys are upstream, so that's important,
Yes.
very much so.
Okay, could we have a motion to approve the funding?
I would make that motion.
I'll second that.
Move to second, all in favor? Thank you. Did you wanna go on with Erica?
Yep, if we don't mind, does everyone have, I apologize, I sent out a late addition to the agenda. Does everyone have the new agenda that has number 5 is executive session? Just- And Jim Foster, if you would mind, like to skip over 4 to be addressed after, but if you go to item 5 in executive session to discuss a legal matter.
This year, Dale Sherman.
Could I have if everybody's okay with that, could I have a motion to go into executive session according to?
According to, 1 MRSA 405-6E.
Prior to a second, I'd like to request that Casey and Mary be allowed to attend this executive session as well. The water trustees, and this item could affect, or something they should be apprised of as water trustees of the Auburn Water
I have
District.
no problem.
My only concern of putting this before public session is if there are people here who are public and when they're gonna ask them, I don't know how long this is gonna take. I would like to have our public session beforehand, since we have guests here, and although 2 out of the 3, I guess we've invited, but, you know, we've been known to wait 20 minutes, and I think that's, I know I just got this now, so.
I would support that, doing
I
it
would
last.
too.
Okay, so I can support that with.
Maybe it's something we
after
should either
executive
put
session.
those first or last, typically.
We're ready, not legal.
That's okay.
But what if we knows ahead of time, and we're all set, that's why they go before.
Okay, so you're looking to do the open session first?
Just the public open
Okay.
session.
Yep.
So with the public open session, I can support that motion.
Okay.
Okay.
So there was a motion with no second? All right.
You said?
I will second with
Oh,
if we
if,
come after
yeah,
the
I
public
would
session.
second it.
Okay, sorry. All right. All in favor?
What are we voting on?
We're voting,
Open session prior to the executive session.
Okay, yeah, I'm in.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so, we'll open it up to the, public session. Anyone want to address the commission?
Well, I have a few things on behalf of the Auburn Water District. I'd like to say that, we are grateful to legal counsel because we've had a need, as you know, to have a lot of support for our most recent election process, which has been successfully at last achieved with a majority vote that secured this election of Camille to join. As you perhaps know, the Auburn Water District trustees are appointed after applying to city council. And we are appointees of the council. except for one position that is a mayoral appointment. As you've heard, our trustee and Commissioner Tiz has been in the role of a resident who had been appointed by council to be a trustee, and then one of our positions to this commission is one of our trustees. And with Tiz having made it perfectly clear that she cannot be convinced to change her mind, what will happen is that her seat on the trustees will become vacant, and we will need another person to apply to become a water district trustee who is a resident of Auburn. So if you know people who you think, who are residents of Auburn, but who would like to be and would be qualified to be a trustee of the Auburn Water District, please encourage them to apply. Our city council, most recently elected, as you perhaps have noticed in the paper, will have its own appointment process, and they will appoint the next trustee to take Tiz's seat. God willing, and the creek don't rise, we will have a successful election in March to elect one of our trustees to take Tiz's position on this commission. We are working very hard to make sure we have a rather new group of trustees with several new people, successfully able to come to sufficient consensus to get majorities. It's taken time in every single thing we try to do right now. But it does begin with getting qualified and interesting persons who are interested in water, particularly water systems, water, the lake, as their primary motivation to being a trustee, to be applied, to become a trustee, to be hopefully elected, and then that does go through the council, elected by council. And then we need to conduct our own election in March. Our position after that on this commission that comes due is the seat that's now held by Bethel. And so we will run a application process for that seat, and we hope it is a smooth process. We did need quite a lot of support to get it successfully conducted, as you know, to get a majority. We had, it took us more than one meeting to find a breakthrough of 4 votes for any one of the applicants that we had. So please assist us. The network is being expanded as far and wide as we can for persons who would like to apply for these seats. That's crucial for us. The other thing I'd like to say, not in my capacity as water district, but my capacity as an individual who's a resident of Auburn and cares about these issues, is that I want to say how excited I am to have a chance to start to offer some suggestions and contacts of a network of so far mostly women who have become quite interested in issues associated with the lake, and in my conversation with Erica. And in the course of this, I've encountered not only how many, of course it can be men too, but so far it's been mostly women, who sometimes we call ourselves the Watershed women, who are not only interested in the issues of the lake, but are in fact many times scientists with a specific expertise. And it turns out there are quite a lot of people with a scientific background. Some of them are women and some are men. And there's a growing interest in potential for citizen science projects to be based on the lake, and I've met with Erica and Lauren. This includes talking with a woman by the name of Brandy McFadden, who not only is highly interested in this, she is a science educator and head of science curriculum at Edward Little High School. And in her position before that, she worked for the New Hampshire Department of Natural Resources on lake water quality in New Hampshire. She's totally up on these issues. She's really interested and has an interest in the idea of making Lake Auburn a focus for multidisciplinary science curricula. anything you do with the schools is helpful. It turns out, she told me that in her work with students at EL, many of the students at EL, including in the honors program at EL, don't know that the city of Auburn gets its water from the lake. And many students at EL don't know where the lake is and have never seen it. So this is a reminder to us of what we don't know about today's high school students. And she is beyond delighted at the potential to make the lake a focus of science education for 9 to 12 education. Additionally, she has a significant role in science curriculum development at Central Maine Community College, and is going to be speaking with individuals there around how this could work for not just sampling activity, but curricular activity. And I think Erica was quite excited. I think there's a whole network of people we can all start to help Erica and Lauren hook into. And it turns out that there's a professor of environmental science at USM who teaches out of the Lewiston Auburn campus, who's professionally the president of the American Algae Foundation. Someone else, I think Sid mentioned that there's a new resident along Lakeshore Drive who lives apparently in the house that the Badets used to own, who's a retired microbiologist. So I think we can start to do some important networking around people with a scientific interest to become engaged. And this would be, of course, education with citizen science projects for people of all ages. There are toolkits for how to do citizen science. I'm pretty sure the Gulf of Maine Research Institute does significant amounts. I've been reading what the Maine Department of Natural Resources is doing with citizen science. Cornell has a toolkit on how to do citizen science projects. They're pretty widespread in many parts of the country. Lake Auburn has a particular multidisciplinary potential to really help more people understand and engage in the science around the lake and open this up for more widespread community knowledge. I think it's a real potential. Fortunately, we have staff resources at the Lake Auburn Watershed Protection Commission to help support this. I am certain, I know that there's National Science Foundation money available for this. So I think I encourage us all to help think about this. Of course, I'm just thinking about Auburn right now. I think Auburn's a particularly critical community to learn more about this, given some of, I don't need to say anymore. But the lake's in Auburn, so it really means a lot of people should know more about it in Auburn. But Lewiston too, and upstream as well. Don't want to forget that. So anyway, that's just a snapshot of a potential activity. Brandy was hoping that we could be sufficiently far along so curricula could be developed for EL to be in effect by next fall. That's kind of ambitious, given how, and it certainly starts small and grows, but I think I'm going to volunteer to be sort of it's a nice part of being newly retired. I've got to figure out what to do with all that free time that I used to devote to various other projects, but I think this is a good way to engage. So I just wanted you all to know that, and certainly networking this stuff is really important. There's a real opportunity, and much of this early effort came from Holly Ewing's presentation at the Great Falls Forum, where there was a capacity crowd in that room, and a lot of people came up to a few of us after that and said, what can we do and how can we expand? So I became sort of active and engaging with people about that around education and information. So I'm thrilled that it sounded good to Erica and Lauren, and I think there are going to be a lot of people who can help make this be a reality. So that's all I wanted to say in public comment. Before we get kicked out.
Well, thank you for coming.
I have no idea. I just come in and then I didn't know we will have meeting. But I'm so happy to meet you and then I understand because I like more politics, so I wanted to have an idea about how the government is work. I came from Texas. I came in United States in 2011. I moved to Texas, Dallas to here in Maine. I just only 1 year. So I am so happy to be here and then to participate maybe after I finish my university doing something for my Lewiston. Already I like it. And then just maybe I said I didn't know importance about Lake Auburn. So if we have website to link to the student understand more, or maybe Facebook or whatever they chatting their people, so they understand how to preserve that lake for safety, cleaning for the lake. If there is website, so even if the people have concerned citizen, if they see something, which website they can link over that and then sending. So can someone to get over there and then resolve the problem. That's the only my idea. And thank you.
Sounds perfect.
It's a really good idea.
Unless Mike knows you personally, he might like your name to put in our minutes.
I was just thinking that, yeah, I might
Yeah,
want to
I
talk to you about how to
apologize.
get that, yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. At this time, we have taken a vote to
Yep.
go to public, so we will ask
So
our
that means
guests to leave
we
because
need
Right.
to leave.
You're on.
this time, Gail, you have something to offer.
Do I have something? Yes, I do, sir. I'd like to make a motion to have, to authorize council to prepare, a written communication to the Auburn City Council, reaffirming our intent of our April 27th, 2019 resolution. And in that, draft, some language suggested language for insertion into the draft ordinance for land use change within the ag district, water district overlay.
I'll second.
Close.
Moved and seconded,
It'll get the
all in
job done.
favor?
I think Mike would like a piece of paper.
Yeah, I didn't get anything.
I'll see no it's because he won't read my pen.
Authorize council to draft.
I'd like to remind people that we have a December 4th meeting, and I think we should keep it because there's other business to come before us besides the budget.
Open session for commissioners.
Open session for commissioners.
I
Anybody
just
else
had
have
one
anything to
thing
say?
because I went to look at it, and thank you, they passed out the schedule for the meeting for next year. And since we do have a December meeting scheduled, I think we ought to be scheduling monthly if there's no business to come before us canceled, but we've had 3 or 4 this year alone, special meetings. And every one that we've scheduled, we've known ahead of time that at least one commissioner could not attend, so we were trading off. If we schedule them the second Wednesday of the month, as we normally do, we can cancel them if there's no business. So I'd like us to take action at the November 4th, and whether to accept what's presented or to put in a schedule for a regular or workshop. I say regular because you can do workshop, but the reverse you can't do.
How does public notification go if we so choose to cancel one? How soon do we, and how do we do that?
He just sends it, just like we do the city, right? You send out a notice to everybody and let the city clerks know, and they change the website.
24 hours, 48 hours? I just wanna make sure if we cancel, we cancel.
Oh, yeah, and I was assumed that we would know a week ahead. You know, so we would probably know the previous meeting to even do that, but we have had a number of special meetings, particularly when it comes to some kind of land transaction that's very time sensitive. And I'd like us not to exclude and be spending all our time saying, well, can we do Thursday or that? That would allow people to know when to expect such action.
Do our bylaws say how often we meet?
No, I just read our bylaws, which are very interesting.
I don't know, 'cause some
I-
do and some.
I can't remember off the top of
Ours
my head
did
if they give
not,
a
if I remember
time.
right.
I don't think they do.
If this is the big thing in our bylaws, by the way, that we have not been doing, I know, the effective date of these bylaws is January 1st, 1992. So there may be people in this room who aren't even born then. Alicia,
in 1992 from high school.
really? Well, you look wonderfully young then. And they will be reviewed by the trustees, meaning the Auburn Water District trustees, at least once every 5 years to consider their continued effectiveness and necessity.
How about we let this settle down before we do that?
I know that, but I meant it's, but again, it was, and that's an Auburn Water District action.
Okay.
But, so if this is our current bylaws, which I took off our website,
That doesn't say.
it doesn't address meetings.
Yeah, I don't, I'll make it come for that.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that the seminar that was held at Bates College was excellent, very interesting. And there were several of us there. And I'm glad we were included.
Okay.
So, because obviously there was an actual class.
That's one with Heather Doolittle?
Yeah,
Yeah,
from Bath,
okay.
yeah, from UMaine, I think.
Ty and Bob?
Yeah, I wanted to go.
Bates and then you made and works for.
But it was obviously a class, and it was very nice of them to include us.
And I think it was Alicia who forwarded our invitation, or you.
Yes,
No,
we
it
had
was
pizza.
Alicia, and I couldn't make it, but she did.
Pizza
pass that
and
on.
She told me it
cider.
was great, yeah.
I don't know how to do this.
Go ahead. After talking with the clerks today, I wonder if at some point, sooner than later, I think we usually, elect a chair in June, I believe, is that
June,
what
right, that's in June.
But given that we are, chairless and we keep asking you to fill in, which is wonderful, and maybe work out that you do it permanently, but I'd like to suggest maybe in the next meeting, we elect a chair, just so we're not chairless for the next few months in this critical time, and
That's fine. I mean, I think the protocol that was done when when I gave up being the chair, John became the chair because I thought it was time for Auburn to have the position of chair.
And aren't you vice chair, which would be the.
And I
for
was the
duty?
vice chair,
Okay,
yes.
so we need to make sure we keep both chair and vice chair positions.
yeah, so I just, next meeting, if we could put that on the agenda, we could
I think
discuss
it's a
it,
great
the chair
idea.
and new, just to get it filled, there's a lot going on, and, you know, the chair may have to interact with Jim,
And would you say that's just to the end of the normal term for June?
I'm open to either one.
I'd like us to get some consistency, so if June is I agree with you, we need one now, but I would do it to fill an unexpired term, so that we do it in June, because, again,
So
the
we're
new
not-
people come.
So that we're not off the agenda, maybe we just pick all that up and talk about that next
Perfect.
meeting? Yeah, cause usually you admonish me when I get off the agenda
You're
too
right.
far, so I figured turnaround's fair play today.
Absolutely, no, perfect.
Cause I'm usually the one that wanders.
One other thing I would wanna comment on is I'm sorry that John Bono's not on the commission any longer. He did a good job.
Should we, maybe next meeting, write a resolution to John thanking him for his service?
Well, that would be a great idea, but I
We
also
took him to
think we
lunch.
could invite John to come to this city council meeting on the,
18.
Cause he lives in
Right.
Watershed.
And then we'll have to write a longer
So,
resolution appreciating his service,
That'll
cause
be
that'll be painful for him.
Okay,
But we should do something for him.
Yeah.
He did a great job.
and I think usually the commission has done something for somebody at the, measuring of the lake for long-serving members. Are we gonna do the update on land negotiation, or are we gonna blow that off?
That'll take 2 minutes if you, want to go into exec. What item are we on now? We haven't, I don't know if you wanna skip
Just
over.
seven.
You
this
just
open session.
did open session for
We haven't
public.
done any water quality update
Yeah.
activity
Oh.
report stuff.
I have a-
Bye, Jim.
We do have a Jim in November, in December 4th, and since kid wait. Thank you, Jim.
Stay,
Thanks, Jim.
Jeff.
Thank you, Jim.
Yeah.
Talk to you soon.
So what's the wish?
Well, you wanna wait?
My wife's home tonight
Up to
and
the
tomorrow
board.
night and not for 2 weeks, so I might exit if it's acceptable to the chair.
Feelings, general feelings, yes?
I gotta bug out of here in a few minutes, so.
The next meeting, I guess.
Next meeting sounds
That
good.
executive session beat us up.
I did.
Okay.
Any land negotiation, is it public, or do we need to go in executive session?
Well,
We do.
land negotiations usually executive session.
Okay.
Okay, do you want me to do it?
Sure.
Okay, I move we go with, executive session in accordance with 1 MRSA, section 405-6C.
Second.
Move for second, all in favor? Thank you, and
You make your presentation.
All right, you're out of executive session.
I move that we come out of, I move we adjourn.
thank you.
Second.